The studio lights dimmed as the audience fell silent. Jimmy Fallon's signature smile faded from his face, replaced by an expression of genuine shock. Across from him sat Caroline Leavitt, the young Republican spokesperson, her calm composure a stark contrast to Fallon's visible discomfort. I don't even know how to respond to that," Fallon stammered, looking desperately toward his producers off camera. The audience, normally ready with supportive laughter, sat in stunned silence before erupting into thunderous applause, not for their beloved host, but for his guest. Caroline Leavitt had just delivered a response that would be replayed millions of times within hours. What began as a typical late-night interview had transformed into a moment that would reshape conversations across America. Before diving into this extraordinary exchange, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful political moments that the mainstream media won't show you. To understand the significance of this confrontation, we need to know who Caroline Leavitt is and why her appearance on The Tonight Show became such a pivotal moment. At just 26 years old, Caroline Leavitt had already built an impressive resume that many twice her age would envy. A former assistant, press secretary in the Trump White House, and communications director for Representative Beas Stefanik Lade had established herself as a rising star in Republican politics. In 2022, she ran for Congress in New Hampshire's 1st District, becoming one of the youngest major party nominees in American history. Sharp, articulate, and unafraid of confrontation, Leavitt represented a new generation of conservative voices that refused to back down from mainstream media challenges. Her appearance on Fallon's show wasn't a random booking. It came after weeks of increasingly tense political segments on The Tonight Show. Jimmy Fallon, once known for his politically neutral approach to late-night comedy, had gradually shifted toward more partisan content. His monologues increasingly featured jabs at Republican policies and conservative figures, while softball interviews with progressive politicians became common. The show's ratings had begun to decline among certain demographics, leading producers to seek guests who might appeal to a broader audience. The stage was set for an interesting exchange when Leavitt accepted the invitation, but no one anticipated just how memorable it would become. Behind the scenes, Leavitt had prepared meticulously, reviewing recent segments and anticipating potential ambushes disguised as light-hearted questions. Fallon's team had prepared a segment they internally called Quickfire, designed to put political guests on the spot with seemingly innocent questions that often contained hidden traps. Previous conservative guests had stumbled through these segments, providing viral clips that circulated for days afterward. As Leavitt took her seat on the famous blue couch, the studio audience offered polite but reserved applause. Fallon began, with his trademark charm, asking about her background and rise in politics. The conversation seemed cordial but slightly tense. Viewers familiar with both personalities could sense something brewing beneath the surface. "So, Caroline, you worked in the Trump administration," Fallon began, his tone shifting slightly. "That must have been interesting." His emphasis on the last word drew knowing chuckles from the audience. Leavitt smiled. "It was the honor of my life to serve the American people in that role. I'm proud of what we accomplished." Fallon nodded, then launched into his prepared line of questioning. "Let's play a quick game. I'll give you a topic, and you give me your immediate reaction. Ready?" The red flag was obvious to Leavitt, but she maintained her composure. "Sure, sounds fun. Climate change?" Fallon began, glancing at his cord. "A serious issue that requires practical solutions based on innovation rather than government control," Leavitt responded smoothly. Fallon seemed slightly taken back by her polished answer, but continued. "January 6th. A tragic day that I and all Americans condemn. Violence is never acceptable in our political process," she replied without hesitation. The host glanced at his producer, who nodded encouragingly from offstage. The audience watched the exchange with growing interest, as Fallon continued with increasingly pointed topics. Election integrity, essential to our democracy. Every legal vote should be counted. And Americans deserve systems they can trust, Leavitt responded. The pattern continued for several minutes, Fallon lobbing politically charged topics, expecting brief, controversial responses, while Leavitt delivered measured answers that defied easy criticism. The tension in the studio gradually increased as Fallon's questions became more direct. Your generation mostly votes Democratic. Why do you think you're on the right side of history? Fallon asked, his tone suggesting there was only one reasonable answer. Leavitt leaned forward slightly. I don't claim to be on the right side of history, Jimmy. That's a phrase people use when they want to shut down debate rather than engage with different perspectives. I believe in individual liberty, limited government, and the extraordinary potential of the American people. Those principles have created more prosperity and freedom than any system in human history. The audience murmured. This wasn't the typical, late-night banter they were accustomed to. Fallon attempted to lighten the mood with a joke, but his timing seemed off. As the segment progressed, Fallon introduced video clips of Leavitt speaking at rallies carefully edited to remove context. Would you like to clarify these statements? He asked after a particularly selective clip played on the monitor. I'd be happy to provide the full context that was missing from that edited clip, Leavitt replied, then proceeded to clearly explain the broader point she had been making, one that sounded much more reasonable than the snippet suggested. Members of the audience exchanged glances. This wasn't following the usual script of a political guest being embarrassed by their past statements. Sensing the segment slipping from his control, Fallon decided to deploy what his team considered their strongest material. He pulled out a blue card signaling to regular viewers that they were moving to a segment called Truth or Tweet, where guests were confronted with social media posts and asked to defend them. I found this interesting, Fallon said, reading from the card. In 2022, you said that young Americans are struggling because of failed democratic policies. Yet economists widely agree that current economic challenges stem from multiple factors, including the pandemic, international conflicts, and corporate pricing decisions. How do you respond to the experts? The framing was cleverly constructed, presenting opinion as consensus and positioning Leavitt against unnamed experts. It was the type of question that had flustered previous guests. Leavitt took a moment, then responded with remarkable clarity. First, I'd question your premise about what experts widely agree on. Many respected economists attribute our inflation crisis to excessive government spending. Second, young Americans don't need experts to tell them what they're experiencing. When my generation can't afford groceries, rent, or starting families, they know something is fundamentally wrong with policies that devalue their earnings and limit opportunity, she continued, building her case methodically. I've spoken with thousands of young voters who feel abandoned by politicians who promised them prosperity but delivered record inflation. This isn't partisan. It's the lived reality of Americans across the political spectrum. The audience, which typically followed Fallon's emotional cues, seemed increasingly engaged with Leavitt's points. Several people nodded along with her arguments, a rarity for conservative guests on the show. Fallon attempted to interrupt several times, but Leavitt politely yet firmly completed her thoughts. The dynamic was shifting before viewers' eyes. What had been designed as a gentle ambush was transforming into a substantive discussion where Leavitt appeared increasingly in command. As the segment approached its most critical moment, Fallon made a tactical decision to invoke Leavitt's age, a factor his team believed would undermine her credibility. You know, Caroline, Fallon said with a hint of condescension, you're very articulate for someone so young, but don't you think there's value in the perspective that comes with more life experience? Many of the policies you support might sound good to someone in their 20s, but people who've seen more economic cycles, who've raised families and built careers over decades, tend to have more progressive views. Isn't it possible that you'll look back in 20 years and realize you were on the wrong side of these issues? The question hung in the air. It was carefully crafted to sound respectful, while fundamentally challenging Leavitt's right to her political positions based on her age. The studio grew quiet as cameras captured Leavitt's expression. For the first time in the interview, she paused for a full 3 seconds, maintaining direct eye contact with Fallon. The moment was electric. Viewers could sense she was about to say something consequential. "Jimmy," she began, her voice clear and measured, "would you have asked that question to a 26-year-old progressive? Would you suggest to a young Democratic spokesperson that their views are invalid because of their age?" Fallon blinked rapidly but didn't respond. The idea that wisdom only moves in one political direction is precisely the kind of assumption that drives young conservatives to speak out, Leavitt continued. "I respect people of all ages and all viewpoints. That respect should be reciprocal." She leaned forward slightly. "My generation faces a housing market we can't afford, rising crime in our cities, inflation eating away our savings, and trillion-dollar debts we'll be forced to pay. Throughout our lives, these aren't abstract concerns. They're the direct results of policies implemented by people who won't live long enough to face the consequences." The studio was completely silent now, the audience fully engaged as Leavitt continued. "So when you ask if I'll change my mind with age, I'd suggest a different question. What gives anyone the right to mortgage my generation's future while telling us we're too young to have a voice in the conversation?" She smiled warmly, removing any hint of hostility from her powerful statement. "I believe the American founding principle that all are created equal applies to all ages. My generation deserves the same respect and consideration as any other, not dismissal couched as concern about our youth." The silence lasted only a moment before the studio erupted. It began with a single person clapping, then another, until the applause became thunderous. Camera operators captured the audience's reaction. People standing, nodding emphatically, some even looking surprised at their own response to her words. Fallon sat momentarily frozen, his usual quick wit failing him. I don't even know how to respond to that," he finally said, looking briefly toward his producers off camera. The applause continued, forcing the show to cut to an unplanned commercial break. Before the camera stopped rolling, viewers could see Fallon attempting to regain his composure while Leavitt sat calmly, the confidence of someone who came prepared for exactly this moment evident in her demeanor. When the show returned, the dynamic had noticeably shifted. Fallon's questions became genuinely curious rather than loaded, and a real conversation emerged for the remaining minutes, something increasingly rare in late-night television. As the segment concluded, Fallon seemed to have developed a genuine respect for his guest, regardless of their political differences. "You've given us a lot to think about," he acknowledged, shaking her hand with authentic warmth. "And I think we'd all benefit from more conversations like this." Within minutes of the segment airing, clips began circulating across social media platforms. The exchange was quickly titled "The Fallon Freeze," as viewers shared the moment when the host was rendered temporarily speechless. By morning, the clip had accumulated over 20 million views across platforms. News programs on both sides of the political spectrum featured analyses of the exchange. Conservative outlets celebrated Leavitt's performance as a masterclass in media engagement, while progressive commentators reluctantly acknowledged the effectiveness of her response. Regardless of your politics, what we witnessed was a textbook example of how to handle a difficult media situation, noted a prominent communications expert on a morning news program. Leavitt maintained composure, redirected loaded questions, and delivered a principled response that resonated beyond ideological boundaries. The Tonight Show's social media accounts, which typically posted multiple clips from each episode, notably omitted the exchange from their feeds, but the full segment was already being shared widely by viewers who had recorded it. Requests for Leavitt as a guest on other programs surged. Network executives who had previously hesitated to feature younger conservative voices began reconsidering their booking practices. Several late-night hosts reportedly reviewed the exchange with their teams, discussing how to better engage with guests across the political spectrum. The impact extended beyond media circles. University professors in communications and political science departments incorporated the clip into their teaching materials. This will be studied for years as an example of effective messaging in a hostile environment, predicted one academic on her widely followed social media account. For Leavitt personally, the appearance transformed her public profile. Her social media following increased by over 200,000 in just 24 hours. Speaking requests from organizations across the country flooded her office. Even those who disagreed with her politics expressed respect for her ability to articulate her positions under pressure. Perhaps most significantly, the exchange sparked conversations about age-based assumptions in political discourse. Opinion pieces appeared in major publications with titles like Ageism, the Last Acceptable Prejudice in Politics, and What Young Voices Bring to National Conversations. The discussion transcended partisan boundaries, with commentators from across the spectrum acknowledging the problematic nature of dismissing perspectives based on age, whether young or old. In a surprising development, Fallon himself addressed the viral moment in his monologue the following night. "Last night we had a conversation that got a lot of people talking," he acknowledged. "And you know what? That's a good thing. We could all use more moments that make us think, that challenge our assumptions. I've read your comments and I hear you." While not quite an apology, his acknowledgement represented something rare in the increasingly polarized media landscape, a willingness to reflect on the exchange rather than defensively dismiss it. Political analysts noted that the moment represented something larger than one interview. What we witnessed, explained a veteran political consultant, was a generational shift in how conservative messaging is delivered. The old models of communication are being replaced by a more direct, authentic approach that connects across traditional barriers. A week after the appearance, polling data revealed a notable shift in younger demographics. Interest in conservative policy positions had increased among viewers aged 18-34 who had seen the exchange. While not a mass conversion, the movement was significant enough to catch the attention of political strategists from both major parties. "This is how you change culture," noted one commentator. "Not through shouting matches or gotcha moments, but through articulate, principled communication that forces people to reconsider their assumptions." The Caroline Leavitt moment on The Tonight Show serves as a powerful reminder that authenticity and preparation can overcome even the most challenging media environments. While most political guests enter these situations playing defense, Leavitt demonstrated the effectiveness of respectful but firm engagement with difficult questions. Dart-Defam exchange carries valuable lessons for viewers across the political spectrum. It reminds us that substantive conversations are possible even in formats designed for entertainment. It challenges media figures to engage more honestly with diverse viewpoints. And it demonstrates that respect firmly requested and freely given can transform confrontation into genuine dialogue. As our political landscape continues to evolve, moments like these provide a template for more productive engagement. They remind us that behind the labels and assumptions we often attach to one another lie people with principles, experiences, and perspectives worthy of consideration. What moment in this exchange did you find most powerful? Do you remember when late-night television featured more balanced political discussions? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more analysis of the media moments that are shaping our national conversation. Your support helps us continue bringing you the stories that matter but aren't covered by mainstream sources.